sleeping against the cowboy's chest, the virgin woke as his unwilling bride. Emily Carter had never imagined herself in a place like this. The wide-open fields, the endless stretch of dry earth, and the distant hills rolling under the afternoon sun were so different from the city streets she had grown up on. She had come to this remote part of Texas only to settle her late grandfather's affairs. Her grandfather had been a quiet man, living alone on his ranch, and now Emily was the only family left to sort through his property, pay off debts, and figure out what to do with the land. She had arrived with a small suitcase, her high-heeled shoes sinking into the soft, dusty dirt as she walked toward the old farmhouse. She wasn't used to this kind of life. In the city, she had a job at a small design studio and spent her evenings in cozy cafes or walking along the crowded streets with friends. Here, the air smelled different, fresh but with a hint of wild grass, animals, and the earth after rain. It was peaceful, yes, but also lonely in a way that made her stomach twist. She felt small and unprepared for everything that awaited her. As she stepped onto the porch of the farmhouse, she noticed the sky changing. Dark clouds rolled in faster than she expected, and the wind began to pick up. She frowned, checking the small leather notebook she carried with her. The sky looked like it could bring a storm at any moment, and she realized she had no idea where she could stay if it got worse. The nearest town was miles away, and the roads could become dangerous when wet. Suddenly, a sound made her freeze. The creaking of the wooden gate, the soft thud of boots on the gravel. She turned and saw a man approaching from the direction of the barn. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the calm confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but she could see his eyes, sharp and steady, looking right at her. "Are you Emily Carter?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind. "Yes," she replied a little nervously. I'm looking for the farmhouse. Is this it?" He smiled faintly and nodded. "You're safe now. Name's Caleb Dawson. You're not from around here, are you?" "No, I'm from the city," Emily admitted. "I just came to handle some family matters." He seemed to understand immediately. "Well, you picked an interesting day for your visit. Looks like a storm is coming fast. You might want to get inside before it hits." Emily felt a wave of relief. She didn't know why, but there was something reassuring about this man's presence. He had a steady way of speaking, and she felt suddenly less alone. She followed him inside the farmhouse, careful not to slip on the porch as the first drops of rain began to fall. The house was simple but welcoming. A fireplace sat in the middle of the living room, unlit for now, and a few wooden chairs were arranged neatly around it, the smell of clean wood mixed with a faint scent of cooked food, probably left by someone who had prepared the house earlier. Emily felt a sense of calm wash over her. At least she was not alone. Outside, the storm was growing stronger. Rain pounded against the roof and windows, and the wind rattled the old wooden beams. Thunder rolled across the sky, making Emily flinch. She hadn't expected the storm to be this sudden, or this loud. In the city, storms were easy to ignore. Here, they felt alive, threatening, powerful. "I guess we're stuck here for a while," she said softly, almost to herself. "You can stay as long as you need," Caleb replied. "There's plenty of room. The storm shouldn't last too long, but I'd feel better if someone were here with you." "Just until it passes," Emily nodded. She wasn't used to asking for help, but now, for the first time in hours, she felt like she could. She set down her suitcase and walked closer to the fireplace. Caleb had already started a small fire to warm the room, the flickering light making shadows dance across the wooden walls. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the warmth of the fire and the quiet presence of Caleb made Emily feel safe. She sank into one of the chairs, pulling her coat tightly around her. Her fingers were still cold from the rain, and the fire felt like a gentle hug against her chilled skin. "Would you like some tea?" Caleb asked, already moving toward the small kitchen corner. "It'll help you warm up." "I would be so happy." She watched him as he worked, amazed at the calm, practiced way he moved around the kitchen. He seemed so natural here, as if the house and the land itself belonged to him. Emily realized how out of place she felt. Her city life had taught her little about this world of hard work and quiet strength. While Caleb prepared the tea, Emily sat quietly, listening to the storm. Lightning flashed outside, followed by the deep rolling thunder that made the floor vibrate slightly. She hugged herself, feeling both nervous and strangely comforted. There was something grounding about being forced to slow down, to be still in a place where the world's noise didn't exist. "Here you go," Caleb said, placing a steaming cup of tea in her hands. "Drink slowly. It'll help." Emily nodded, taking a careful sip. The warmth spread through her body, calming her nerves. She watched Caleb as he sat down opposite her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes always alert, watching the fire more than her. He didn't say much, but she didn't mind. Sometimes words weren't necessary to feel safe. Hours passed, the storm growing louder, and Emily found herself growing sleepy. The chair she sat in felt soft, warm, and inviting. The sound of the rain on the roof, the occasional rumble of thunder, and the gentle crackling of the fire created a strange lullaby that made her eyelids heavy. She hadn't realized how tired she truly was. Travel, anxiety, and fear had worn her down more than she thought. Caleb noticed her nodding off. "You should rest," he said quietly. "There's a guest room, but if you're too tired to get there, it's fine. Just stay warm." Emily's lips curved into a small smile. She appreciated his kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. She felt a strange sense of safety that made her eyelids droop even more. She didn't know why she trusted him so quickly, but she did. Before she fully realized it, sleep took over. The chair was warm, the fire flickering, and the storm outside providing a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She shifted slightly, leaning back, and in her half-conscious state, she found herself resting against Caleb's shoulder. He didn't move. He simply allowed her to find comfort, understanding that she was exhausted and frightened. He could feel the weight of her body, the small sighs escaping her lips, and he remained still, letting her rest. There was no awkwardness, no discomfort, just two people caught in a storm, one offering warmth, the other accepting it. The hours passed in silence. Rain continued to pour, lightning illuminated the room for brief moments, and Emily slept peacefully, unaware of how quickly her world was about to change. She had no idea that this simple, innocent night would lead to challenges and decisions she had never imagined. By morning, Emily would wake up with the weight of the night pressing down on her. The storm would have passed, leaving behind a quiet sun and the smell of wet earth, but the innocence of the night would be lost in the eyes of the town and the traditions they followed. And Emily, who had only sought shelter, would find herself at the center of a story she had never asked to be part of. For now, though, she slept, unaware of the whispers of fate. The warmth against her, the safety she felt, and the crackling of the fire were all that mattered. In that moment, the world outside didn't exist, and the storm, terrifying just hours ago, had become a distant, comforting memory. Morning came slowly to the countryside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky painted in pale gold and soft blues, and the fresh smell of wet earth filled the air. Emily Carter woke with a start, blinking at the sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then the warmth she had leaned against the night before reminded her. She sat up, startled, realizing she had slept leaning against Caleb Dawson's chest. Her heart raced. She had not intended to fall asleep like that, and the thought of what it might look like to anyone else made her cheeks burn. She quickly stood up, smoothing her clothes and avoiding looking directly at him. Caleb, noticing her movement, gave a quiet, understanding smile. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a calm reassurance that helped her breathe more steadily. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice gentle. "Did you sleep well?" Emily nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, thank you. I didn't mean to." She trailed off, unsure how to explain without sounding awkward or embarrassed. Caleb shook his head. "It's fine. You were tired. No harm done." For a moment, the room was filled only with the soft sound of the wind outside and the occasional chirping of birds. Emily tried to calm her racing mind. She wanted to forget the incident entirely, but something deep inside told her that things might not stay so simple. The storm had ended, but a new kind of tension had already begun. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden knock on the front door. Emily tensed. Visitors at this hour in a remote countryside home were unusual, and she wondered who it could be. Caleb, without hesitation, walked over and opened the door. Outside stood Mrs. Lillian, the housekeeper who had worked for the Dawson family for decades. She was small, sharp-eyed, and had a way of seeing more than most people noticed. Her expression softened slightly when she saw Emily, but there was an unmistakable look of concern in her eyes. "Good morning, Miss Emily," she said. "I hope the storm didn't cause you too much trouble." Emily smiled politely. "It was fine. Thank you, Mrs. Matz." "Lillian, I just didn't expect such a heavy storm." Mrs. Weirdy. Lillian's eyes flicked toward Caleb and then back to Emily. There was a pause, a subtle tension in the air that Emily couldn't place. I see. Well, you both must have been caught in it. It's not usual for anyone to be out in that kind of weather." Emily frowned slightly, sensing there was more behind her words. Caleb cleared his throat. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Lillian. We were careful. The storm didn't catch us unprepared. Mrs. Lillian nodded slowly, but her gaze lingered on Emily for a long moment. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Something was happening, something she couldn't yet understand. After she left, Caleb turned to her, his expression serious. The town is small. News travels fast, and people notice things they shouldn't. The way you stayed here last night, well, some folks might misinterpret it. Emily blinked. Misinterpret it? I don't understand. Caleb sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's just people in a small town can be very protective of certain traditions. A young woman staying the night in a bachelor's home, even if it was completely innocent, can lead to questions, and sometimes questions lead to judgment. Emily's stomach dropped. She had never imagined that simply taking shelter from a storm could create trouble. She had always thought her life in the city had prepared her for independence and freedom, but here, in this quiet countryside, things seemed different. Social expectations carried weight. Reputation mattered more than explanation. Judgment? She whispered, feeling a mix of fear and frustration. I didn't do anything wrong. I know, you didn't. But others might not see it that way. That's the problem with small communities. They can assume too much before hearing the truth. Emily paced the room, trying to think of a solution. So what do we do? Can we, explain? Can we explain? Caleb shook his head slowly. Sometimes explanations aren't enough. Not when people are attached to their ideas of honor and tradition. It's not fair, but it's the reality. Emily felt helpless. She had come here expecting to handle legal matters and maybe spend a few quiet weeks sorting through her grandfather's things. She hadn't imagined being caught in a storm, sleeping in someone's home, and suddenly having her entire reputation threatened. Her heart ached with frustration. How could one night change so much? She looked at Caleb, who was quietly observing her. Despite the tension, there was a calm strength about him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to control her. He seemed to understand the unfairness of it all. And yet, he also knew the power of the town's opinion. Emily realized she was not alone in this struggle, even if the circumstances were terrifying. The morning moved on, but the shadow of the storm outside seemed to linger in the house. Emily tried to focus on practical matters, thinking about the land, the farmhouse, and what she needed to do next. But her mind kept drifting to the incident from the night before and to Caleb's warning about the town. By midday, the first few neighbors began to arrive, curious and friendly, or at least polite. Emily greeted them, trying to appear confident, but she noticed the subtle glances and whispered questions. She wasn't certain, but it felt as if everyone already knew about the night she had spent leaning against Caleb. The feeling was suffocating. She felt like a small figure in a story she had not written, one where every action was magnified and misjudged. Caleb noticed her discomfort. "Don't worry about what they say," he whispered as they walked toward the barn. "We'll handle this carefully, one step at a time. Your safety and comfort come first." Emily nodded, grateful for his presence. Even though the situation was unfair, it helped to have someone who understood and protected her. She watched him work with the horses and tend to the land, realizing that his life was built on responsibility and respect, even if others didn't always see it. As the afternoon turned to evening, whispers in the town began to grow louder. Emily overheard bits of conversations when she walked through the small streets. Neighbors discussing her, speculating about the night she had stayed at the Dawson farmhouse. It was impossible to escape, no matter how hard she tried. Fear mixed with frustration, but Emily also felt a strange determination. She had faced challenges before, but never like this. She would not let herself be defined by rumor or misunderstanding. She wanted to stand her ground, to be seen for who she really was, not for the story others wanted to tell. By sunset, Caleb called her back to the farmhouse. "It's best if we talk," he said quietly. "We need to figure out a plan before the town makes any decisions for us." Inside, he poured tea again, the warmth a small comfort against the anxiety that had settled in her chest. Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm her mind. She realized that whatever happened next would change everything, her life, her independence, and perhaps even her future. Caleb spoke gently, explaining the traditions of the town and the expectations that were likely to be placed upon her. Emily listened, her mind racing. She didn't agree with these rules, but she understood that ignoring them could make things worse. She felt a mix of frustration, fear, and resolve. By the time night fell, Emily knew that the coming days would not be easy. The storm had passed, but another kind of storm was approaching. a storm of expectations, rumors, and decisions she had not made. She realized that her life in this quiet town would be far more complicated than she had imagined. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, there was one thing Emily noticed: Caleb's steady presence. He was calm, respectful, and patient. Even though they faced a world of judgment and misunderstanding, he did not try to control her or force her into anything. He offered support, and in that support, Emily found the smallest seed of hope. That night, as she lay in the guest room, Emily stared out the window at the wide, starry sky. The land was quiet, the storm had passed, and the world seemed calm. But she knew that tomorrow would bring challenges she had never faced before. She would have to navigate the town's expectations, defend her reputation, and make decisions about her own future, all while learning to trust and understand the man who had sheltered her during the storm. For the first time, Emily realized that her story in this small town was just beginning, and whatever happened next, she knew she could not escape the consequences of a single night, a night that had started with shelter from the storm and ended with the quiet beginnings of a life she could never have anticipated. The days following the storm were tense for Emily Carter. She tried to focus on her grandfather's affairs, sorting documents, inspecting the land, and planning repairs, but everywhere she went, the quiet whispers of the town followed her. Every glance felt heavier. Every nod or polite smile seemed to carry a hidden judgment. She had always been independent, used to making her own decisions in the city, but here she felt as if every step she took was under scrutiny. Caleb Dawson remained her anchor. He treated her with calm respect, never pushing her to do anything she didn't want to do. But Emily could see the strain in his eyes, too. He was caught between protecting her and honoring the unspoken expectations of a small community that valued tradition above all else. He seemed to carry the weight of the town's opinion on his broad shoulders, even as he reassured her that she had done nothing wrong. Then came the conversation that Emily had feared the most. One afternoon, as the sun began to set over the golden fields, Caleb led her to the porch. The air was warm, but the tension between them made it feel heavier. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but serious, "I need to be honest with you about what might happen next. The town, they notice things and they expect certain resolutions when they see situations like ours." Emily's heart sank. "Resolutions?" she repeated, a lump forming in her throat. "Yes," Caleb said softly. "They might expect marriage." Emily stared at him, unable to process his words at first. Her mind raced. Marriage? After one night? She felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and fear. I didn't do anything. How can they even suggest that?" Caleb took her hand gently. "I know it's unfair. I know it's not what you want. But in this town, honor and reputation are taken very seriously. If we don't act, they might try to make decisions for us. This way we have some control, and I promise no one is forcing you. You will have a say in everything." Emily pulled her hand back, pacing the porch. Her thoughts collided in a whirlwind of frustration and fear. She had come here to manage her grandfather's affairs, not to navigate the rigid rules of a town she didn't know. And yet, here she was, facing a decision she had never imagined. "I feel trapped," she whispered finally. "I didn't come here for this. I don't want this. Why should one night decide everything about my life?" Caleb's gaze was gentle, filled with understanding. "I understand. And I want you to know I won't make this harder than it has to be. I'll support you. But we also have to think about protecting your reputation and safety. That's all this is about." Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She hated that it had come to this. She hated that her innocence could be questioned simply because she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yet, despite the frustration, there was a strange sense of relief in Caleb's calm demeanor. At least someone was on her side. At least someone cared more about her well-being than appearances. The next days were filled with preparation. The town's elders, led by the local pastor and a few respected families, insisted that a ceremony be arranged quickly. It was a small event, nothing extravagant, but the message was clear. In their eyes, Emily and Caleb were now engaged in a way that satisfied tradition. Emily felt herself shrinking under the weight of the expectation. She had no say in the matter, or so it seemed, and every plan made her feel smaller, as if her independence had been stripped away. Yet Caleb remained a constant presence. He allowed her space, encouraged her to rest, and never forced her to agree to anything immediately. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields near the barn, Emily finally spoke her fears aloud. "I don't even know if I can do this. I don't even know you, and now they want to decide that I should marry you. How is that fair?" Caleb stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "I won't lie," he said. This is unusual, and yes, it is not fair. But I also know that people will assume the worst if we don't act carefully. This doesn't mean you're trapped. You will have choices, Emily. You will always have choices, and I promise, I will never do anything to hurt you or force you." Emily studied his face, searching for any hint of deception, but there was none. She realized that he, too, was caught in a situation he had never wanted. The difference was that he had the calmness of experience, and she had only the raw confusion of a world turned upside down. The ceremony day arrived sooner than Emily expected. She was given a simple white dress, not a gown, just a dress that would meet the town's expectations. Her heart felt heavy as she looked at herself in the mirror. She had imagined a life of independence, of making her own choices, and now she was being asked to stand in a public ceremony with a man she barely knew. Caleb entered the room quietly, offering her a small, reassuring smile. He didn't touch her or try to comfort her in ways that would make her uncomfortable. Instead, he simply said, "You're strong, Emily. This doesn't define you. Just know that I respect you, always." Those words, simple as they were, brought her a small sense of calm. She nodded, taking a deep breath and stepping toward the waiting room where the elders and a few townsfolk were gathered. The ceremony itself was quiet. The pastor spoke briefly about honor, responsibility, and the importance of protecting one another. Emily followed the motions mechanically, feeling the weight of the town's eyes on her. Every step she took felt like a surrender of her freedom, but she reminded herself of Caleb's promise. He would never force her to do anything against her will. When the ceremony concluded, Caleb offered her his hand, not with expectation, but as a gesture of support. Emily hesitated for a moment, then took it. It was a small, cautious connection, but it gave her a strange sense of relief. Despite the circumstances, she was not alone. The days following the ceremony were awkward at first. Emily felt like a stranger in a life she hadn't chosen. She moved carefully around the farmhouse, keeping her distance when needed, but observing Caleb quietly. She noticed the way he tended to the animals, repaired the fences, and cared for the land with a patience and strength that amazed her. He was not just a man of tradition, he was a man of responsibility, integrity, and quiet kindness. Slowly, Emily began to understand Caleb in ways she hadn't expected. She realized that he, too, was navigating the pressure of expectations. He had agreed to the marriage out of respect for her reputation and the town's customs, not out of desire. And yet, he remained gentle, giving her space and treating her with respect, never crossing the boundaries of her comfort. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun sink behind the hills, Emily finally allowed herself to speak honestly. "I don't know how to feel about any of this," she admitted. "I feel trapped, and yet I can see that you're not trying to trap me." "It's confusing," Caleb nodded. "It is confusing," he said, "and I understand why you feel that way. But I want you to know something important. Your feelings matter more than anything else. This marriage, if you choose to stay, is not about taking your freedom. It's about protecting you and giving you a choice." Emily looked at him, noticing the sincerity in his eyes. She realized that despite the strange circumstances, she was being treated with respect and care. She wasn't alone in facing the challenges of a small town's traditions. And for the first time since the storm, she felt a small spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could navigate this new life without losing herself entirely. As night fell, Emily lay in her guest room, reflecting on the past few days. The storm had passed, but another kind of storm had begun. A storm of expectation, rumor, and tradition. She knew the coming weeks would be difficult, but she also knew that Caleb's calm presence offered her a chance to face it with courage. And for the first time, Emily understood that this marriage, though started under circumstances she hadn't chosen, did not have to define her. She could still make decisions for herself, protect her independence, and discover the kind of life she wanted to lead. For now, though, she closed her eyes, listening to the quiet of the countryside and the gentle sound of Caleb moving about the farmhouse. She knew the world outside would be challenging, but inside there was warmth, safety, and the first glimmer of trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Emily felt for the first time since the storm that she could face them, not alone and not without hope. The days slowly turned into weeks, and Emily Carter began to notice things about Caleb Dawson that she hadn't seen before. At first, she had only seen him as the man who had sheltered her during the storm, the man who had agreed to a marriage she had never wanted. But now, as she observed him quietly, she realized there was more to him than the quiet, strong exterior. He worked from dawn to dusk on the ranch, but it wasn't the work itself that impressed her, it was the way he did it. Every movement was careful, deliberate, and thoughtful. He checked the fences not just for strength, but for safety, knowing the animals depended on them. He fed the horses with patience, speaking to them softly, as if understanding their moods and needs. He repaired broken gates with meticulous attention, never rushing, never cutting corners. Every task he undertook seemed to carry a respect for life, for nature, and for responsibility. Emily began to feel a quiet admiration for him, though she tried not to acknowledge it. She still felt frustrated about the circumstances of their marriage, still wished she could have made her own choices without the pressure of the town's traditions. Yet she couldn't deny that Caleb's integrity and kindness left a deep impression on her. One afternoon, Emily wandered near the barn where Caleb was mending a broken fence. She watched him for a while, noticing the way he paused now and then to listen to the sounds of the ranch, the creak of a gate, the whinny of a horse, the rustling of the grass in the wind. He seemed in tune with the land in a way she had never experienced. "You notice a lot, don't you?" Caleb said quietly, not looking up. His voice startled her, but she smiled nervously. I guess I do," she admitted. "It's hard not to. Everything here feels alive, different from the city." He chuckled softly. "It is alive. Every part of this ranch has its own rhythm. You just have to listen." Emily nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had spent her life surrounded by concrete and noise, schedules and deadlines. Here, life moved differently. It was slower, quieter, yet fuller, in ways she hadn't realized. She began to understand that Caleb's connection to the land was not just work. It was a form of respect, a way of life. Over the next few days, Emily began to help with small tasks. She fed chickens, gathered eggs, and watered the garden. At first she was clumsy and unsure, fumbling with baskets and spilling water, but Caleb never laughed at her mistakes. Instead, he guided her patiently, showing her how to hold the tools, how to carry the eggs without breaking them, how to work with care and attention. "You're learning fast," he said one morning as she balanced a basket of eggs. "Most people from the city wouldn't even try. I want to learn. It's different here, but I think I can get used to it." He nodded, and she felt a strange warmth in his approval. For the first time since their marriage, she began to feel a connection. Not romantic, not yet, but a connection based on mutual respect and understanding. Caleb wasn't forcing her to feel anything. He wasn't pressuring her. He was simply showing her the world he knew, and in doing so, he was teaching her patience, responsibility, and trust. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Caleb invited her to walk along the edge of the fields. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. Emily hesitated at first, unsure if she wanted to spend time alone with him, but something in his calm demeanor convinced her to accept. As they walked, they spoke about small things, the weather, the animals, the routines of the ranch. Slowly, Emily began to open up about her life in the city, about the things she had loved and the things she had feared. Caleb listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He asked questions gently, showing genuine curiosity without prying. "You had a busy life," he said finally, as they reached the edge of a small creek. "City life is different from this, I imagine. Faster, louder, less forgiving." Emily laughed softly. "Yes, everything moves too quickly. People forget to notice the little things. Here, it's different. I see things I never noticed before. The way the sun hits the fields, the sounds of the animals, the smell of rain on the earth. It feels alive." Caleb nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "It is alive, and it teaches you things if you're willing to listen. Patience, care, responsibility, and sometimes it teaches you about yourself." She realized that she was learning about herself every day. Her resilience, her ability to adapt, her capacity to care for something outside herself. She began to see that the marriage, though started under unusual circumstances, was offering her experiences she would never have gained otherwise. Days turned into weeks, and Emily noticed small gestures from Caleb that she couldn't ignore. He would bring her tea in the mornings just the way she liked it, remembering even the smallest details she had mentioned in passing. He always ensured her room was warm and comfortable, that she had enough to eat, and that she felt safe on the ranch. He never demanded attention or gratitude. He simply offered care, quietly, consistently, without expecting anything in return. One evening, Emily found herself sitting on the porch while Caleb repaired a fence nearby. She watched him work, the setting sun casting a warm glow over his figure. She realized she felt a sense of peace in his presence, a peace she had not known before. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was trust, safety, and respect. And for someone who had felt so alone and threatened by the world just weeks before, that feeling was priceless. As the week progressed, Emily began to confide in Caleb about her fears and frustrations. She spoke about the town, the expectations placed upon her, and the strange circumstances that had led to their marriage. Caleb listened, never dismissing her feelings. He offered advice when asked, but mostly he simply provided a steady presence, a safe space where she could express herself freely. One afternoon, as they sat together after feeding the animals, Emily asked a question that had been on her mind for days. "Do you ever wish this had happened differently, that we hadn't been forced into this?" Caleb looked thoughtful. "I've thought about it," he admitted. "But things happen in ways we don't expect. What matters is how we respond. I didn't ask for this, but I want to make sure you're safe and respected. That's all that matters to me." Emily felt a lump in her throat. His words were simple, yet they carried a depth of care that she hadn't anticipated. She realized that Caleb was not her enemy, nor was he simply a man caught in the same situation as her. He was someone who genuinely cared about her well-being, someone willing to put her comfort and safety above his own. As the days passed, Emily's feelings continued to evolve. She still struggled with the circumstances of their marriage and the expectations of the town, but she began to notice a growing appreciation for Caleb. Not for the idea of him as a husband, not yet, but for the man he was, the strength, patience, and kindness he showed in every action. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Emily realized something important. She didn't have to rush her feelings. She didn't have to accept or reject anything immediately. She had time to understand Caleb, to understand herself, and to decide what she truly wanted. For the first time, she felt a sense of control over her own heart, even in a situation that had started as completely out of her control. And in that moment, leaning against the railing of the porch with the cool evening breeze on her face and Caleb standing quietly beside her, Emily understood that their story was not yet written. It was still unfolding, shaped by their choices, their trust, and the respect they showed one another. And for the first time, she felt a sense of hope, not just for the days ahead, but for the possibility that something meaningful could grow from the unexpected circumstances that had brought them together. The morning sun rose gently over the rolling fields of the Dawson Ranch, spilling golden light across the farmhouse and illuminating the quiet beauty of the countryside. Emily Carter stood on the porch, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, staring out at the horizon. The days since the storm and the unexpected ceremony had been difficult, full of whispers, challenges, and uncertainty, but they had also been days of understanding, reflection, and growth out. For the first time, Emily felt that the future was truly hers to shape. She had learned so much about herself, about independence, and about the world outside the city. And she had also learned about Caleb Dawson, the man she had thought she barely knew. He was not the man of gossip or rumor that the town might imagine. He was patient, kind, and deeply respectful. Every action, no matter how small, revealed the values he held dear. He cared not just for the land, the animals, or the expectations of the town, but also for her well-being. That understanding had grown slowly over weeks of shared mornings, quiet conversations, and careful observation. Emily turned as she heard Caleb approaching. He carried a small basket of freshly picked vegetables, his movements steady, practiced, and unhurried. His eyes, meeting hers, held the same quiet sincerity that had drawn her trust in the first place. "Good morning," he said softly, placing the basket on the porch table. "I thought you might like something fresh for breakfast." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the morning sun. "Thank you," she replied. "You always think of the smallest details." Caleb shrugged lightly, but there was a hint of a smile on his lips. "It's easy when you care about someone's comfort." Emily felt her chest tighten. His words were simple, yet they carried a depth of meaning she could not ignore. For so long, she had been wary of trusting anyone, especially after the circumstances that had brought them together. But now, she realized that trust was no longer something she had to force herself to feel. It had grown naturally, quietly, and with a steady rhythm that mirrored the life of the ranch itself. The morning passed slowly, filled with small shared tasks. Emily helped Caleb in the garden, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked side by side. There was no pressure, no expectation, only companionship. She began to notice the subtle ways he paid attention, noticing when she struggled to lift a basket, or when she hesitated to reach for a tool, quietly stepping in to help without making her feel incapable. By mid-afternoon, the sun had climbed higher, and the warmth of the day invited a walk along the creek at the edge of the property. Emily hesitated, unsure whether she wanted to confront the emotions that had begun to stir inside her. But Caleb's presence was reassuring, and she knew that honesty, both with herself and with him, was necessary. Well, they'd gone as they walked. The soft sound of water flowing over the rocks and the gentle rustle of the trees created a peaceful backdrop. Emily finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Caleb, I've been thinking a lot, she began, glancing at him, about everything that's happened, about this marriage, and about us. And I realized something important. I don't have to be afraid anymore. Not of the town, not of the circumstances, not even of you. Caleb looked at her, his expression calm but attentive. I'm listening, he said gently. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her chest ease slightly. I see now that you never forced me. You never tried to take away my choices. You've been patient, respectful, and kind, even when everything around us was complicated and confusing. And I think I've come to understand you. Caleb's eyes softened. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say, he replied. I want you to make your choices freely. That's the only thing that matters to me. Emily smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of relief and courage. I know. And that's why I want to stay. Not because anyone expects me to, not because of the ceremony or the whispers, but because I want to be here, because I've come to see who you really are. And I trust you. Caleb's hand reached for hers, this time with a gentle invitation rather than a formal gesture. Emily hesitated for a moment, then let him hold her hand. The warmth of his touch was comforting, steady, and full of meaning. For the first time since the storm, she felt a sense of freedom, not from the circumstances, but from the fear that had held her heart captive. The rest of the afternoon passed in a quiet, comforting companionship. They returned to the farmhouse, working together in the kitchen to prepare a simple meal. Emily noticed how naturally they fell into rhythm. No awkwardness, no forced conversation, just shared effort and understanding. She realized that love, she thought, might not always start with fireworks and excitement. Sometimes it begins quietly, in respect, patience, and the small acts of care that build trust over time. As evening fell, they sat together on the porch watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. Emily leaned back, feeling a sense of peace she had never experienced before. The fears of the past weeks, the whispers of the town, the pressure of tradition, the confusion of circumstances felt distant. What mattered now was the present, the quiet understanding between two people, and the choices they could make together. Caleb broke the silence. Emily, you're free to leave, you know. If you wanted, I could arrange for you to go back to the city, to live your life without this ranch, without me. No one would judge me for it. Emily looked at him, surprised by his words. But I don't want to leave, she said softly. I've realized something important. I want to stay here, with you, because I choose to. Not because of anyone else, not because of expectation, but because I want to. Because I see who you are, and I trust you. Caleb's eyes reflected a mixture of relief, gratitude, and quiet joy. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of the trust she had placed in him. In that moment, Emily knew that the story that had begun under strange and unexpected circumstances was finally taking the turn she had chosen herself. The following weeks passed with a growing sense of partnership. Emily became more confident in her daily routines, tending the garden, caring for the animals, and learning more about ranch life. Caleb continued to guide her with patience, never expecting perfection, always showing care. Their bond strengthened not through grand gestures, but through the steady rhythm of shared life and mutual respect. The town, too, began to see a different side of their relationship. Whispers of scandal faded as neighbors noticed the genuine respect and partnership between Emily and Caleb. It became clear that their connection was built on understanding, patience, and care rather than force or obligation. One evening, as Emily and Caleb sat watching the sunset, Emily realized that the fear and uncertainty of the past had been replaced by hope and trust. She leaned her head lightly against Caleb's shoulder, a gesture of comfort and choice, not of obligation. He placed his arm gently around her, and for the first time, everything felt right. I never expected this, Emily whispered, her voice filled with quiet emotion. Not the storm, not the marriage, not any of this. And yet, I'm glad it happened. Because I found you. And I found myself in the process. Caleb smiled softly. I feel the same, he said. Life doesn't always go as we plan, but sometimes the unexpected brings something better than we could imagine. And now, we get to write the rest of our story together, on our own terms. As night fell, the stars twinkled over the Dawson Ranch, clear and bright in the peaceful sky. Emily felt a sense of completion and new beginnings. The girl who had once woken in confusion and fear now stood as a woman who had made her own choice, embraced her own freedom, and discovered the quiet, steady love that had grown from patience, respect, and trust. And so Emily Carter chose to stay, not because tradition demanded it, not because anyone forced her hand, but because she wanted to. She chose to trust, to love slowly, and to live freely, guided by her heart and by the man who had always treated her with kindness and respect. In the end, the storm had passed, but it left behind something stronger than fear or uncertainty. It left behind trust, understanding, and the beginnings of a life chosen freely, together. And for Emily and Caleb, the days ahead promised a partnership built not on obligation, but on mutual care, respect, and the quiet growing love that comes from truly seeing and valuing one another.